The young woman who died 39 years ago unexpectedly became a witness for herself, exposing the cruel criminal with nothing left but hundreds of pages of investigation notes passed through generations of detectives who still couldn't solve the case. 4 decades seemed far too long to uncover the truth. So how could the one lying beneath the grave possibly reveal the identity of her killer? Michelle Martinko pointed to her own murderer after nearly 40 years of silence underground. Michelle Martinko shined in her school's choir. Born in 1961 in Iowa, she was the youngest of 2 sisters. Though a bit reserved, Michelle carried herself with natural grace, admired for her beauty and kind personality. As a high school student, she wasn't only well-liked, she was also talented, known as a skilled instrumental performer and a standout member of her school's choir. By the end of 1979, Michelle Martinko had just turned 18 and was preparing to graduate high school. Her school organized a private choir party and she attended with great excitement. But tragically, that very evening would become the last night of her life, as fate brought her face to face with pure evil. In Cedar Rapids, on the night of December 19, 1979, Kennedy High School's choir gathered for their holiday celebration at the Sheraton Hotel. Michelle arrived dressed in a black dress, a black scarf, and a brand new winter coat she had just bought. She stayed until 7 p.m. when the party ended. Afterwards, she planned to drive her father's 1972 Buick Electra to the newly opened Westdale Mall, where her mother had asked her to purchase a winter coat. Her mother had given her $180, some for the coat, the rest Michelle could use for herself. Michelle thought shopping would be more fun with a friend. Before leaving the party, she called her best friend Johnson and asked her to come along. But Johnson apologized she had important homework to finish that night. With no other option, Michelle went to Westdale Mall alone. At the mall, Michelle walked around the shop, stopping to chat with friends and acquaintances who worked there. She spent about an hour browsing. The last time anyone reported seeing her was between 8 and 9 p.m. outside a jewelry store. After that, she disappeared from sight. By 2 a.m. on December 20th, 1979, Michelle still hadn't returned home. Worried, her father called the police to report her missing. Officers quickly began searching the Westdale Mall, the last place she had been seen. At about 4 a.m. that same morning, police discovered a car parked between Westdale Mall and JCPenney. It was the 1972 Buick Electra Michelle had borrowed from her father. Officers forced the door open and made a chilling discovery. Michelle Martinko was inside in the passenger seat, her body showing clear signs of a violent assault. From the initial examination, investigators counted multiple stab wounds and noticed defensive injuries, evidence that Michelle had tried to resist her attacker. Strikingly, no blood was found outside the car. This led police to conclude that the attack had happened entirely inside the vehicle. The coroner's preliminary report stated that Martinko had died sometime between 8 and 10 p.m. Since she was last seen at the mall between 8 and 9 p.m., police believed the attack likely occurred between 9 and 10 that night. However, there were very few leads for investigators to follow. First, while it was clear Michelle had been attacked with a sharp weapon, the murder weapon itself was never recovered at the scene. Second, no fingerprints other than Michelle's were found inside the car, suggesting the attacker may have worn gloves. Third, all of Michelle's belongings, including her purse and money, were still inside the vehicle untouched. Altogether, this suggested that the crime had been carefully planned rather than a random outburst. In the end, police classified the case as a premeditated crime and launched a full investigation. Thus began a long and difficult journey for the detectives. Recognizing the seriousness of the case, within just 1 week, police had interviewed more than 200 people. They even carried out polygraph tests on local residents with prior criminal records. Yet none of this led to a viable suspect. Police then learned that Michelle's ex-boyfriend Andy had briefly seen her at the mall on the night of the crime. Investigators quickly treated him as a prime suspect and questioned him intensely. However, they could not find any evidence linking Andy to the crime. He presented a clear alibi that was verified, and he was soon removed from the list of suspects. Despite the efforts of investigators, no new leads emerged. The case seemed to have reached a dead end. 5 months later, in May 1980, a phone call came into the police station. The caller claimed she had seen a suspicious man in the parking lot on the night of the murder. That evening, her daughter had been working at the mall. When her daughter's car broke down and she couldn't get home, the mother drove there to help. At that time, the witness noticed 2 cars parked in the lot, one of them being Michelle's Buick Electra. She recalled seeing the driver's side door open and a man standing next to the car. Later, when she saw the news report about the murder, she realized it had happened in the same area she had been that night. When asked why she hadn't come forward sooner, the witness admitted she had felt uneasy about contacting the police directly. Instead, she told a friend who happened to be the police chief's daughter what she had seen. She assumed the chief's daughter would pass the information along to the authorities. But months later, when the witness called the police station to confirm if her account had been delivered, she was shocked to learn that it hadn't. The chief's daughter had never reported it to investigators, she had only told her father. When questioned, the police chief admitted he had received the information from his daughter, but strangely never passed it on to the investigative team. In an interview with the press, officials even said they considered filing charges against him for withholding crucial information. But in the end, no formal accusations were made. On June 19, 1980, police carried out hypnosis sessions with 2 private witnesses who had reportedly seen the suspect at the crime scene. The witnesses described the suspect as a white male, likely in his late teens to early 20s, with brown eyes, curly hair, standing about 6 feet tall, and weighing roughly 160 to 175 pounds. Based on their description, authorities released a composite sketch to the public. From there, detectives interviewed hundreds of people, hypnotized 30 others, and even consulted psychics in their desperate search for answers. Yet the case showed no sign of progress, and as time passed, public interest slowly began to fade. Even though police offered a $10,000 reward for any information about the suspect, not a single tip of value came forward. 5 years later, in the mid-1980s, Michelle's father filed a lawsuit against the owners of Westdale Mall, arguing that negligence on their part had contributed to his daughter's death. The case eventually reached the Iowa Supreme Court, which on September 17, 1986, ruled against his claim. Years later, Michelle's father passed away in 1995, still without answers about who had taken his daughter's life. Her mother followed in 1998. By then, the case had slipped completely into cold status. Time moved on until October 2006, 27 years after Michelle's death, when investigator Dvorak, a veteran officer with the Cedar Rapids Police Department's cold case unit, decided to reopen her file before his retirement. As he carefully reviewed the case files from beginning to end, Dvorak discovered a potentially decisive clue. There were traces of blood from an unidentified male found both on the gear shift of Michelle's car and on her black dress. Investigators theorized that during the struggle, the assailant may have accidentally injured himself, leaving behind this vital piece of evidence. Police then worked with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation Crime Lab to extract a DNA profile from the sample. According to reports, the DNA was complete enough to establish a full genetic profile. They uploaded the DNA profile into CODIS, the national database, but unfortunately no matches came back. For years, investigators compared the suspect's DNA against countless registered profiles, yet every effort led to the same dead-end no match. Eventually, in 2015, Dvorak retired and handed the case over to a younger investigator named Matthew Denlinger, who had been only 5 years old when Michelle was killed. Coincidentally, Matthew's own father had once been on the original investigative team for the case. Growing up, he had often heard his father speak about Michelle's story, and once he became a detective himself, he carried a deep personal connection to it. By 2018, it was time to put DNA evidence to the ultimate test. Shortly after taking over, Matthew read through all 800 pages of the original case reports. Like his predecessor, he compared the suspect's DNA with national records. But after 8 months, Matthew realized that random testing was ineffective. He needed a more focused strategy to narrow down potential suspects. On May 16, 2017, Matthew contacted a company called Parabon Nanolabs based in Virginia, which specialized in DNA phenotyping. Parabon had technology capable of predicting a person's physical appearance based solely on their genetic makeup, though expensive police signed a contract with the company. Soon after, Parabon used the suspect's DNA profile to create a new composite image. It depicted a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes, completely different from the earlier sketch that had circulated decades before. Parabon also generated an age-progressed version of the suspect's face, showing what he might look like decades later. After the images were released publicly, police received more than 100 tips, but none of them led to the actual perpetrator. A year later, in 2018, Parabon contacted Matthew with a new idea. Instead of relying solely on the National Criminal DNA Database, they suggested uploading the suspect's DNA to a public genetic database called GEDmatch1 that everyday people used for genealogy and which had already helped capture a notorious serial offender. Believing it was worth the chance, Denlinger agreed to proceed. Working with Parabon, Denlinger uploaded the suspect's DNA to GEDmatch, and almost immediately a partial genetic match appeared. It belonged to a woman named Brandy Jennings, who lived in Vancouver, Washington. With the cooperation of her relative Brandy Jennings, Parabon and investigators obtained her DNA sample. Further analysis revealed that the killer was likely a distant relative of hers. For months, Parabon and the police built out a detailed family tree. Their research pointed to the likelihood that the suspect was a great-grandchild of Randy's family line. Detectives began identifying descendants and testing their DNA one by one. Through this process, Matthew located a woman named Janice Burns. DNA analysis showed that Janice and the suspect were cousins, which narrowed the pool of suspects down to 3 of her male cousins: Donald Burns, Kenneth Burns, and Jerry Burns. Donald and Kenneth agreed to DNA testing, and both were quickly ruled out. Their DNA did not match. That left Jerry Burns as the last potential suspect, but he refused to provide a sample. Since police could not compel DNA testing without a warrant, they decided to discreetly collect it and began surveillance on him. On October 29, 2018, undercover officers observed Jerry Burns drinking from a plastic straw. After he discarded it, police retrieved the straw as evidence. The DNA taken from it was sent to the lab, and the results were astonishing. It matched the DNA found on Michelle Martinko's clothing nearly 4 decades earlier. On December 19, 2018, exactly 39 years to the day after Michelle's death, police arrived at Jerry's workplace with a warrant for his arrest and brought him in for questioning. By 2020, justice finally caught up with him. Jerry repeatedly claimed he couldn't remember anything from that time and insisted he didn't know who Michelle Martinko was. When investigators asked how his DNA ended up at the crime scene, he had no explanation. Growing uneasy, Jerry requested the police perform a second DNA test. Police collected a fresh DNA sample from Jerry using a swab, and once again it matched the DNA from the scene. On December 19, 2018, exactly 39 years after Michelle's murder, Jerry Burns was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, the most serious classification carrying the harshest penalties under the law. On February 10, 2020, Jerry Burns finally went on trial. His defense attorney argued rather implausibly that on the night of the murder, Burns had been at Westdale Mall and that his DNA had somehow been transferred indirectly onto Martinko. Prosecutors strongly disagreed, noting that Michelle had interacted with more than 10 friends that evening, including at the mall, yet none of their DNA was ever discovered at the crime scene. The prosecution stressed that the only way Jerry's DNA could be present in 2 separate spots at the crime scene was for one reason alone: Jerry was the killer. Finally, on February 24, 2020, Jerry was found guilty. On August 7, 2020, at the age of 66, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After nearly 4 decades, justice had arrived. For nearly 40 years, the case had haunted Michelle's loved ones and the community. Finally learning who was responsible brought some relief and lifted part of the weight that had long burdened them. Yet the tragedy remained unresolved in one aspect. Jerry never confessed to why he did it, continuing to deny his role in Michelle's death. Many theories and speculations began to circulate. After Jerry's conviction, other disturbing details about his past surfaced. Some suspected he might have been involved in other crimes. For instance, in 2008, his wife Patricia Burns was ruled a suicide. But neighbors insisted she had no reason to take her own life. They suspected Jerry had been involved. On December 19, 2014, one of Jerry's cousins also went missing under mysterious circumstances. Because of past conflicts between them, suspicions again turned toward Jerry. Yet without solid evidence, no charges were ever filed. It left many to wonder if Michelle Martinko had tragically been one of several carefully chosen victims. As for why Michelle and not someone else, the deeper motive remains a mystery. Some believe the murder may not have been pre-planned, that Jerry could have been at the mall that night, seen Michelle walking alone to her car and attempted something sinister. Perhaps a confrontation escalated, and in her panic, Michelle resisted. In the struggle, Jerry ended her life, cleaned up the scene, and fled. Still, until Jerry himself admits to what he did and tells the full story in his own words, we may never truly know the motive behind this chilling crime. Even now, Jerry continues to prepare appeals. But for the Martinko family, the case is already resolved. They believe it was Michelle herself who ensured justice because she fought back that night, leaving behind the injury that ultimately led police to her killer. Without that act of resistance, the case might have remained unsolved forever. To her family, it was Michelle who caught her killer, even from beyond the grave. At last, they believe she can rest in peace.